All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Um, Welcome to Lens with Advanced Design. My name is Hector Silva. We're actually very excited today because this is our 50th episode. I don't know if you knew that, Adam.
Yeah,
Our 50th guest on Lens. So thank you for your time. Um, our guest today is Adam Côté. He's a director of strategy design at NewDealDesign, a fantastic Bay Area design firm. Adam works to unite people and technology in new or unconventional ways as a means to benefit the future of our everyday experiences. His projects span categories that include remote and in-person healthcare, autonomous vehicles and mobility, smart homes and living spaces, consumer electronics, lifestyle goods, digital information, and social impact. Last year in 2019, actually, Adam was one of our speakers at our annual design conference, Square One, as New Deal Design hosted one of our events at their studio. So we're extremely grateful for that opportunity to work with you, Adam, and to have you on Lens. So thank you so much for being here. Um,
thank you for inviting me. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
So let's move forward, and you have the floor now. And
All
like I
right.
mentioned, after you're done with your presentation, we'll come back and have a conversation. For those who are attending, we do have a Q&A section here in the webinar, so feel free to ask your questions, and we'll integrate them in our conversation with Adam. So the floor is all yours, Adam.
All right, great. I'll get to sharing. All right. So thanks again, Hector. I really appreciate the invite, and I appreciate getting to spend time here with you today. So today, my presentation, as you probably know from the from Instagram or LinkedIn, is action from purpose, and also it might be looked at as reaction from purpose, thinking about building, responding, and acting from purpose is really kind of the meat of what I'm going to be talking about today. So first off, here's that design studio in San Francisco. This is my wonderful team at NewDealDesign. That's me in the back there. I really do work there. Yes, this is also a photo from February 2020. Now we have probably wearing face masks and there's a lot more hair, but still same team, just as inspiring and incredible to work with as ever. So our team at NewDealDesign is made up of 4 distinct disciplines. We have strategy design, which I'm the director of. We have industrial design, we have experience design, we have product development engineering. So we have a pretty cross-functional approach to every project that we work on. When a brief kicks off, when a project kicks off, we all work on it in parallel simultaneously. So it's a really dynamic, really fluid, pretty exciting experience. And even while I'm showing these kind of 4 disciplines for NewDealDesign, I would say that each of these disciplines is inherently quite multidisciplinary in and of itself. So it makes this type of collaboration really meaningful, really beneficial, and really exciting. So our motto is be bold, build wisely. And the meaning of that is really looking at the sum or the combination of our experiences, of our expertise, of our knowledge, and using that to take creative risks that are necessary in terms of making the type of more bold impact in the market that really benefits the human experience. So something I personally hold really dear in terms of the culture of studio that I work for. And so here's just kind of a quick example of a few of the projects that we're working on. In terms of just the market today, in terms of cutting through the noise, we understand that there's a lot out there. We care really deeply about relationships and focusing on building relationships versus necessarily being transactions. And part of that is really making sure that the work that we're doing, the businesses, the brands, the physical, the digital service experiences are capturing something that's relatable, that you can connect to, and that's a personality. And so we think about all the various spaces that our work lives in, it occupies, and we really consider deeply the type of presence we want to have in those spaces, the variety of channels, the mediums, whether it's audible, is it emotive, is it static, is it dynamic, considering all of that and really trying to express this personality and this character that we feel like is something we could relate to And that's an example of some of the work we have in New Deal. So let me talk about what I'm sharing today. So I mentioned earlier, action from purpose. This is really based in what this past year really continues to inspire, what I've seen, and what I continue to learn from, and what I'm focusing on moving forward. And part of that focus is some ways in which I'm applying it. So first of all, I have good design, good in parentheses here, because it's something pretty subjective, but thinking about being functional and adhering to standards of craft, it being something that's admired. It's becoming increasingly ubiquitous, and it's something that we expect. This is something incredibly important, but it's just something that I'm starting to see is more ubiquitous, it's more expected, but it's also something that is incredibly appreciated and admired. Regardless of background or commitment to craft, there are new design capabilities, resources, tools that are literally at our fingertips that seem to emerge every day that make good design more accessible. And apologies for this really corny animation, but I mean, we're seeing, even in just large organizations, businesses are prioritizing design more than ever. We can all name a variety of studios that have been acquired in the past few years, and that an abundance of talent, from contracting platforms to just means of acquiring knowledge and honing that craft, it's just giving this accessibility to good designs that businesses haven't seen in the past. And so it's my feeling that good design is no longer a true differentiator. I'm seeing it as a prerequisite. So what? I think there's something really important here that is starting to become, that is a differentiator. It's becoming increasingly adopted, and that's embracing your purpose. And so here I have a great image from Patagonia. This is something that is clearly, it's something so small, such a tag, but that's so clearly a thread to the purpose that and reason why that Patagonia exists. It's about enjoying the outdoors, and individuals can't enjoy the outdoors if there aren't any outdoors to enjoy. And so this comes from a very purpose-driven approach in terms of taking a stand against climate denial, and it also adds that little bit of some discovery in terms of seeing that tag, finding that is really characteristic of exploring the outdoors. And so I won't harp on this very long. I just think this wasn't surprising. This is something that, like a variety of different extensions, from repairing used jackets or outdoor wear, to then manufacturing or making new jackets out of recovered garments and things like that, is just, it absolutely feels continuous from this greater purpose and throughout the entire ecosystem of Patagonia. And so when we talk about purpose at New Deal, a lot of the times we kick off our projects with our clients through what we call an immersion session, but really, for this purpose, an interactive, dynamic stakeholder interview. And part of that, is talking to the executive team or the team that's hired us. Maybe it's a startup, a young group of individuals, or large startup, large organization. And so we'll ask, getting down to the purpose, why does your business exist? And what is the higher order principle, or what's your reason for being? Another way of asking that, moving further, is beyond money. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? What is that driving force? What is that vision that you're constantly seeking and moving towards? And then how does that presence, your presence, you, the individual, the business, the brand, make the world a better place, just solely by your presence in it and in the activities that you participate in every day? And then similarly, something that I'm starting to think of more and more as and consider is just, what are your core beliefs? So we talked about being relatable, creating those relationships. And so I feel like an individual, a business, a brand can have core beliefs, a core belief system, as we have a pretty, we've noticed a pretty morally plural society. We can't please everybody, and in considering the strength of those connections, or in terms of affinity and equity, we really need to find a way to hone in on that purpose and be more deliberate around that personality, and be thinking about how it's not just something so incredibly rigid, a statement that we came up with one day and now we're gonna hold to that forever. But like my core belief system and my morals considering how the environment, externalities affect me, I internalize that, and I continue to learn and grow. And I feel like our organizations, our brand, our design work can do that as well. And so here's kind of an interesting quote. This is from an article that Kay, our director of relationship, has shared with me. Actually, it's inspired by Matthew McConaughey. It's really wonderful. It's on Fast Company. You should check it out. But the comment here is identity is very important. Identity and purpose in this presentation. In fact, it's much more important than personality when it comes to life outcomes. Your identity is the story you tell about yourself. It's how you see and define yourself. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior over time reflects personality. So from our purpose, having these brand signals that communicate and show our actions and show our behavior that reflects both externally and internally our culture and what we believe in terms of creating those relationships, in terms of that being a differentiator, in terms of making impact beyond just profit as the end. And that's really what I'm talking about when we're discussing purpose here, is purpose beyond profit. And so today, as I'd mentioned, I'm talking about building, responding, and acting from purpose, acting from a place where business value is a byproduct of your impact in the lives of all of your stakeholders, not just the particular end user, but all of those involved in the public that may not ever be necessarily using that product, using that service, but interacts with it. How are we considering them? How's their impact in that way? And then one thing that's just kind of crucial to note here that I feel like can get lost is it's not one or the other. They're incredibly connected. It's just moving beyond profit and seeing that as just the ends here, and looking at other ways to create value in the lives of and in the world. So starting with building from purpose, just a little look at some of the framework that we like to consider at New Deal. And again, this is not necessarily something rigid set in stone, at least towards the last end of this, but just a kind of more of an overall understanding of how we're approaching our work, or I'm approaching my work. Starting with purpose beyond profit, kind of what we just established here in terms of the reason for being that exists beyond just making money every day and our impact in the world. Using that in our research and early design sketching and collaboration and consideration and discussing with a variety of different stakeholders in the process, getting to that kernel of business differentiation. And from that, crafting a very distinct personality, something that can express across this variety of channels, mediums, touch points that I mentioned. And then, whether this comes before, the next, we can debate, but considering like the foundation for the products and services that extend from that purpose, from that differentiation, and then thinking about the brand experiences, ways in which customer service might come into play, the way we see animation, sounds we might hear, different touch points in terms of opening up packaging, et cetera, et cetera. And something I want to note here, while these are some, I have these, as they're iterative, it's not something we're designing necessarily in a vacuum, or, we're just going to check that box. We're continuously iterating and honing into something that's feeling stronger and feeling more relatable in terms of the work that we're doing. And something to note on why distinct personality is so important is, in considering the consolidation of studios under acquisitions, we find it so important to take a stand for expressiveness and taking a unique approach to the design work, as we're seeing the possibility and some hints at more uniformity as less and less maybe more individual studios are out there. And so similarly to that is something that we also consider when naming and in kind of the culture of the work that we do, is the ice cream principle, something that I heard from Eli Altman, who wrote Don't Call It That. And this idea that, if you ask 10 people to go choose an ice cream that they all agree on, they're probably going to come back with chocolate or vanilla, and we're not going to see the really insane new radical flavors that might exist. So that's just something that we keep that in the back of our heads. It's not necessarily we're designing every single thing like that, but this is definitely a case for why we feel that personality and expressiveness and emotion and character is so important in the work that we're doing. And so again, this isn't designed in a vacuum. We think a lot about culture and trends, a lot about stakeholder needs, again, not just that end user, but all those involved in clients as well, competitive and market intelligence, as well as thinking about the internal DNA and the history of the organization that we're working with. So maybe this is someone that's been around for a lot longer, and so how can we do some cultural archaeology in terms of like the purpose that we're trying to get to, that's driving the experiences that we create, or capturing the DNA or the internal culture that we're seeing from maybe the founding team that is really beneficial to the work that we're doing in terms of capturing that character, capturing that personality as we move forward. And so a quick lesson before I get into just a couple examples is a lesson from brick and mortar that from earlier in my career working in retail design. I think it's really incredible. I have Apple here, of course, but mainly because of this discussion of it being a temple to the brand. And I think there's something so interesting that these spaces have the opportunity to really capture and control the expression of the brand, of the business, across a variety of these interactive touch points that activate the senses in a way that we can't necessarily do if we don't control that whole environment. That I think is really incredible to consider. Think about if there was coffee, if there's music, interactions with customer service is not now the voice that's inside your head when you're dealing with a bot looking for help digitally. But just thinking about this as then an opportunity to thinking about it almost as like a mixer in terms of music is these different values, the purpose and how that comes across can shout and it can whisper in a variety of different ways that we can think of in just singularly in that touch point and in that interactive experience. How does the personality, the storyline, the purpose come across? But then also taking a step back and looking at the entire system, how do they come across, and how is this thread, how is it expressed? What presence does it have when looking at this entire ecosystem of the brand? So this is really an inspiration in terms of like how we can start to do that to maybe map what could be undervalued or underestimated interactions for that expression, for that presence, and really finding that potential. And so, similar to that is this here is an example of a service blueprint that we designed for a remote healthcare startup. So this is mapping out all of the operational activities and touch points that exist within this service. And this is a finished product, but it's also been intentionally obscured for the purpose of this presentation. But here the client came to us as a reaction to DIY or direct to consumer teeth aligning, teeth straightening services. So there wasn't they operated under this kind of false narrative or false notion that not having an orthodontist or a specialist involved, we could continue to deliver the responsible care without that being in place and just being more about convenience and accessibility. But teeth straightening isn't everything, and a lot of individuals had a variety of different complaints. A lot of things went wrong as more research came out throughout the work of the project. So we were hired to be a to help them design a responsible alternative to DIY, and a major part of that was being both having the convenience, accessibility, and affordability that we've come to expect from modern services, but still keeping that responsible quality of an orthodontist, of a real licensed orthodontist at the center of care, to ensure that responsibility and keep them at the heart of the program. And so mapping out all of these activities and organizing all of them from these multi-sided, from patient to provider to manufacturers and labs and the brand and customer experience itself, was able to guide the development of the brand, the service, the various apps, and then the remote monitoring device, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And so something really important came from the work that we were doing with this in terms of thinking in storyboards. So I have two examples here. It's not one or the other. We're saying both. Is looking at using Post-its in terms of organizing the individual activities and being able to start to map that out, but then going further to then look at those individual activities in a storyboard format, which allows yourself to really be immersed in what could be a mundane or seemingly unimportant touch point, and to animate it, to show personality, to show opportunity for what could be something innovative in that little simple area that creates a really differentiating experience. And so in this way, we can provide options. We can show a variety of different degrees, even on just in one touch point, and see how these are all starting to connect with each other, and how we're maximizing and creating kind of the most meaning or substance within those spaces by really putting ourselves in there and designing in that moment. And so there's something really powerful that happens here that I have noted, which is just being able to shift between this ecosystem view and then immersing yourself in that touch point. So we have a looser, older version of the service blueprint and just some of the more refined sketches, or not refined concept down selecting that we had on here. But what we can do is see these individual touch points, see where we're putting that personality, where certain features might belong versus others. Considering when you're welcoming this brand inside your home for the first time, if it's through delivery, because this is both an in-person and remote experience. And then looking at how these individual moments can tie into the entire narrative or the purpose and the reason for this organization existing. And so it's really helpful to be able to jump back and forth between that to make sure, or to just push for creating more of that relatability, that connection throughout all these touch points to get to something that feels really, really substantial. So the next example I have, so these two examples I'm going to touch on in the next section, but this is a client that we worked with that's just incredibly proud to work with, and they're just a wonderful team called Philanthropy Together, and their purpose is to help new giving circles start and help existing circles thrive. So a giving circle, put really simply, is a group of individuals with shared values that come together to make change. And whether that's donating to and participating deeply in their community, this is about new ways and new movement to diversify and democratize philanthropy, and turning it into something that is proactive, a part of the community and a part of your daily life. And so if you want to learn more, please look at whatisagivingcircle.com. It's really incredible, and also please get involved. And so the point I wanted to bring up here with Philanthropy Together was just a notion of support, not supplant. This idea that if we're helping new circles start, existing circles thrive, we want to uplift all the circles, uplift all the networks that are involved in this movement of philanthropy. And so this idea of support, not supplant, is making sure we uplift everybody. And so we made a pretty deliberate design decision after our discussions with them to make sure that everything was as accessible as possible. So we chose to do our work, and this might seem minor, but it feels really powerful to me, is we did everything in Google Docs and slides, forms, etc., making sure that these could be shared, promoted, manipulated slightly in terms of making it right for the other giving circles that would be using this, thinking about typography or typefaces that were accessible, thinking about the brand design from a place where we know others are going to be in others' photos, other giving circles, imagery and design work is going to be beside this, or brand work is going to be beside this. And so we want to make sure that it's all working together and it all feels something incredibly accessible. And that was a really inspiring way of executing that. So the next section is I've called responding from purpose, and this is really thinking about these lessons, these learnings from the past year that I'm discussing. So some of these aren't necessarily new, but they're helping to frame or ground kind of the point I'm trying to make here. And we saw massive luxury fashion house make hand sanitizer, all responding to COVID-19 and the pandemic that has been affecting this world. We're seeing New Balance, shoe manufacturers, Nike, Adidas, et cetera, making PPE, diverting processes and time to take care of that. Thinking about Headspace, giving free services to healthcare and then to unemployed, and then now trying to increase services for individual for all as much as possible. That maybe isn't a completely free subscription. Thinking about in the community. Mixed, it's a restaurant here in San Francisco that was doing pay what you need programs to help out the community where they could. Similarly, Oakland Unified School District, the purpose, Nourishing Minds, is now wanting to make sure that these children are getting proper meals and making sure that this is, I think, from March, but is now something that's continued to today, even as we're starting to see a resurgence. To just individuals, friends, that if they have a a 3D printer are taking a moment to shift gears and start doing what they can to produce PPE to give to friends in healthcare, et cetera. Thinking about just individuals in doing something maybe that they don't have a 3D printer, are taking to LinkedIn to offer whatever help or services they can, from resume reviews to introductions, to even just making sure that there's a like so that this is getting seen. It's just inspiring to see. And our client from the remote healthcare example that I gave, Grin, they released, so initially all about orthodontists and specialists, but more importantly about affordable, accessible, responsible care. And in the midst of the pandemic, they shifted gears and decided that they would offer the scope, this what is really the piece that's on the phone here that's enabling the remote monitoring, to provide that for free to individuals and now to general practitioners, not just orthodontists, because the primary focus is on dental healthcare and remote healthcare and promoting that. And so as a result of that shift in gears, we're seeing great brand recognition, access to new partnerships, and just I'm just really proud and really just inspired by what Grin is doing. And then in the wake of a national reckoning of racial injustice here in the United States, we're seeing a large organization like IBM no longer offering, developing, or researching facial recognition technology, or saying that they won't sell it to the police. We see Sephora being the first retailer to sign that they're taking the 15% pledge to dedicate 15% of shelf space, minimum, to Black-owned companies. Individuals, friends, were posting on behalf of their organization that's doing one-to-one donation matching, or just providing, creating art, selling whatever they could in terms to raise money for community foundations or donations, and doing it on others' behalf, or guiding from that, but taking a stand to really make that, to acknowledge and bring that awareness. And then Philanthropy Together really powerfully and very quickly organized and started to create these webinars around collective giving and support of Black communities. And this isn't something that they waited to create. Now they have a community practice around this, things that they're building out, but they didn't wait for a rebrand. They weren't waiting to make sure these other things were built out. They reacted quickly and from a place of purpose in what they felt they needed to do, and what needed to be done at that time. And just similarly to just showing what they continue to do is looking at Launchpad. This is a leadership training program to help individuals start their giving circles. It is now evolved into a couple different tiers of this, but again, they got out and started acting and responding, and started signaling to the public what they value and what matters to them. And part of that is this pay what you want model in terms of Launchpad, and that all has to do, a suggested amount of $50, but this model suggests that they have incredible trust in the next generation of leaders that these programs will be who will be graduating from these programs. And so that is an incredible signal. That's a way of acting from purpose and acknowledging the externalities that are involved, and making movements quickly instead of waiting. And granted, we talked a lot about what's happened in this past year, and I just wanted to bring up an example of just possibly business for business sake, in terms of thinking about, we can also react from new market entries, from changes in technology. And I just think Ford is a really great example of really throwing out that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and implying human-centered design principles, or becoming increasingly agile in terms of their internal culture, attracting talent, and using that to inform this vehicle right here, the Mach-E, or in terms of bringing more connectivity to vehicles. This is showing that that internal culture is so strong, and that there's a way to respond to these changes in the market, and even someone as large as Ford can make a huge difference. And similarly, as a result of that kind of internal culture, they're able to pivot here and start making PPE, ventilators, et cetera, in kind of the onset of the pandemic, and those are incredibly impressive. So a point I want to make here too is that in considering these response, acknowledgement of what's going on, and reacting from a place of purpose, and making sure that you are reacting, is that we are increasingly living in glass houses. Our actions as an individual, as a brand, as a business, are just becoming more and more transparent. And a singular individual, one single experience can command a global stage with how we use our phones today. And so it's really important to acknowledge, to welcome sincerity. I think now we're just seeing more than ever, like the onset of the pandemic, it's like thinking of, who's really trying to just sell to people, not feeling as authentic versus who's actually, really embracing an ability to make some impact and to do what they can. And that I feel like we saw really incredible affinity, and really positivity and recognition from that, from individuals. So I see it, accept challenges, the successes. We can be transparent in that way, to show where we've had downfalls and how we've come from that. It's all about, I think, learning and growing. And that goes back to the quote about identity in the beginning, and how purpose can be more of a belief system, and that we can learn and grow and evolve from that. Just really briefly, I think something that I thought was interesting was an artist that I follow, who's known for pretty violent, maybe more political or commentary on human rights, was known for maybe more ambiguous, kind of mysterious, posts in which he'd be selling a print or something. And it's just interesting to see people coming and, responding, maybe more outraged, saying, you can't do this without giving us an explanation. You can't, exploit the situation without, finding some way to donate to communities or give more of a backstory around what is going on here. And I thought it was just really powerful to see, that's definitely changed, evolved. Now we're seeing large paragraphs about artist intent, and more commentary around how you can be a part of the change, and maybe possibly around like where proceeds are going, et cetera. So I just thought that was really interesting in terms of looking at what's being asked of individuals, of businesses, of brands today, and how we need to be responding. Similarly, this is an interesting quote from Ben Horowitz that I just love, and this is tying into what we just saw with the philanthropy together, with all those responses. Is a culture is a set of actions, not beliefs and intents. It's what you do and who you are. And then also similarly, culture is how your company makes decisions when you aren't there. I thought that was really incredible. And so here I take this as, purpose means nothing without action. I aspire to do that. I'm planning to do that. I'm hoping to do that. You need to start making it happen and signaling to the individuals, because those words mean nothing. But then also action can be unified and organized by that purpose, and creating that sincerity, creating that honesty, or creating this thread or this narrative in terms of how you're showing up in all these variety of places, of interactions, of experience. And so that takes me to a point of where I'm trying to employ more consideration for fluid, purpose-driven continuity when I'm thinking about the spaces that brands could inhabit, where design, where physical and digital inhabits, and thinking about that personality versus just a strict rule-driven consistency, just in terms of going back to this, rigid guidelines or rigid principles, thinking more of how can I, internalize what I'm feeling externally, and make sure that this is more of a symptom, or not symptom, but it's driven by internal culture, and able to be more flexible and thinking about the entire system and the space simultaneously, to really capture what that opportunity or what that interactions is good at, in terms of capturing that personality and expressing that purpose. And so I think there's something important to note here is, got to be thinking about return on investment when we're weighing impact versus feasibility in making it happen. But what I think is really important here is to be sure to weigh the opportunity cost of staying stagnant, of lacking transparency, and avoiding acknowledgement or response, because that could really cost you, in terms of just not being valued, not being around anymore, because what you're saying is not in line with what it is that you're doing. And so to just finish up this section, this is just something I always was inspired by ever since I saw this documentary called Propaganda from Brown English. It's just saying the thing about doing billboards that's unique is I can have a concept right now, and I can go home and paint it tonight and have it on a billboard tomorrow. And I just think that's what I'm talking about in terms of just accepting what's going on, acknowledging it, and seeing, how are you going to respond to it? How are you going to react to it? And it's going to, and making sure that that response and that reaction is from a place of purpose is really important. And so lastly, it's just more of this, a talk about culture and acting from purpose, and just how I'm putting this into practice. So just thinking about why I get up in the morning, and what's my purpose at NewDealDesign is thinking first about, humanity. This is a triangle here of a couple different, major pieces, components to this purpose, but thinking about the human experience, thinking about the planet, getting up every day to know that what I could be contributing towards a better future for my son. And then thinking about clients, wanting their success to come from, that impact that we are bringing to the individuals that, they are here, the problems that they're here to solve, making sure we're bringing that impact. And then the portfolio. So thinking about, does this benefit the type of work that we want to be doing in the studio? How does it promote the studio, recognize, and even personally? And the important thing here is making sure that there's mutual value creation that comes from that. And so I put this out here just to say, this is something, just an area that, this is kind of deep down what I'm thinking about in terms of collaborating, and in the next couple slides that I'm going to mention. So here's just a snapshot from our process. And this is something that we call, the dark horse, or a dark horse, is looking at kind of towards the end of this decision-making process, and the step that I'm focusing in on here is ensuring that there's a contrarian concept. And so this is something really powerful, because it works to validate, and it works to strengthen other ideas by having something that's well, what if it isn't an app? What if it doesn't have a screen? Thinking about something that could be a bit more radical in terms of the mainstream thinking that's been established so far, in terms of what we're all gravitating towards or ideating on. What it does is it helps to validate the mainstream thinking, and maybe that is the right way to go. At the end of the day, it feels like this is the right decision to make, or it creates a new concept entirely. And there's something important here that's not only that this isn't not only client facing, but that is something that is facilitated and encouraged throughout the studio, is making sure that we have this dialogue that allows for this creative friction, where we are coming from a place of a deeper purpose and wanting to serve the individuals that our products and services are meant to benefit, and making sure that we're using that as a source to challenge, to and to expect more from each other and the environment that we're in. So just kind of breaking this down, this the last slide here, is just how I'm thinking about acting from purpose. So here's this concept of embrace friction. It doesn't have to just be with your design teams, with clients, with leadership. It could be partners, vendors, etc. But allowing there to be not that critique, that criticism of not being so tied to what it is that you're building or working towards, to either see it from a place of, okay, I'll try that. And does this end up validating the original concept? Maybe it does. Does it strengthen it? Maybe it does. Or it gives reason to abandon that and go in a new direction that is, at the end of the day, is gonna bring more value. And so part of that is something I read in a book called in a course that I was in from Ellie Aven. It was called The Power of a Positive No. I think it's very cool, very interesting book. But this idea of, like, in embracing this friction, letting your no, or the resistance to something, or a critique, come from that deeper place of purpose. So not feeling like we're yes people, we always agree to this, this, and this, or feeling that you're being, you're difficult, or a situation like that. Just know that this is about wanting, collective progress and getting to better ideas and to better concepts. So let your no really flow from that place. And similarly from that, I feel like from experiences that I've been through, speaking sometimes these painful truths with clients in particular can build trust. It's not just saying like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's letting them know that this is very important to you, important to their success, and that you're not just going to let this fly by and be missed. So as we talked about earlier, is just zooming in and out between the touch point and the system. So thinking about how that touch point can better express your purpose, react to all that's going on out in the world, and internally and externally, and then thinking about the kind of the main system and how all these things work and live together harmoniously. And then last is just this bias towards impact with a creative approach to feasibility. So if it is something that is as you're validating it, it feels incredibly impactful towards, you know, the individuals, the groups that you're trying to serve, and it may be more difficult. You know, one, think about that approach to opportunity cost, and what if you don't do this, you know, what's the value in that? But then thinking about, you know, not just necessarily reserving it for you, guarding it, you know, finding who on your team, on other teams, you know, other partners that can help to make this thing happen. And you know, it might not be that you can get to A to Z at that moment, but really considering the steps that you can make to get there, but just making sure that you're acting and that you're doing, um, and making progress. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. Fantastic insights. Really appreciated.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Um, you know, you talked about action to purpose, and I think I thought it was pretty awesome how you personally have your own kind of set of kind of guidelines on essentially why you wake up in the morning, right? And I think that that's something valuable that I think everyone should really consider, especially if you are like yourself, you know, working in the Bay Area, very competitive work environment. You know, you mentioned that you have kids. I think I think that that's pretty awesome. One question that I had for you is you brought up, you know, these actions and strategies that retailers and restaurants are kind of began to do during these social injustices to raise awareness, but also you know, raise funds. Do you think that designers can use their skills and platform to be activists?
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's from a, you know, individual platform, from, you know, your personal brand, whatever that may be, or you know, so thinking about social media, about your portfolio, about, I think about how easy it is to set up, you know, simple business and start, you know, selling things or services in that way. But then I think more importantly is just how can you advocate for that change or push for that change within your environment, if you're working for a large organization or for a studio. And I think that's really important. And that was a bit of, you know, the point of my last section there is just these different ways that you can, you know, find that ability or that courage to say, you know, I don't want to stand for that, or I want to push for, or push for this initiative, and just making sure that it, you know, it's not it has to come from a deeper purpose. Just it feels easier and it flows more authentically, I feel, from you, or genuinely from you, when you do that. And I can tell you that from experience.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about brand and having a personal brand. You know, I think now everyone, especially in design, we're all very well connected with social media and Instagram, and that's essentially an opportunity for everyone to build their own brand. Um, you know, you talked about the importance of branding, which kind of surpasses, you know, personality and character. As someone who works at New Deal Design, and I'm sure you guys get a lot of applications when you guys are hiring and looking for designers to come work, you know, in the Bay Area. How important is branding? Do you look at people's social media, or is that kind of something that happens afterwards? People use social media in a variety of ways. They can use it in a very professional way where they upload a lot of things to promote their work, or some people just use it to goof around and do, you know, post silly videos or TikToks or whatever. Um,
Right.
but what is that process, right? And why is it important? Maybe is it important? Should people really take social media seriously?
So that's an excellent question. And it's funny because I see it in a couple different ways. I mean, if someone's taking it incredibly seriously, then it's somewhat resonating on a similar line to their portfolio, in terms of the type of work of what's coming through. And that's really beneficial and really exceptional to see. And just helps you get, you know, maybe a little bit more detail into process, a little bit more detail into even sure, like, in sharing what's interesting to them, or things that, it's so great to see what is influencing a designer, what's something now today that is inspiring, or pushing, pushing them, motivating them. But I think also it's I really want to hear too, it's like what drives you outside of work, what's important to you outside of work. So if there's some goofing off, you start to see, like, what do you value? Is it cooking, photography, seeing crazy color palettes and someone's outfits that they like to showcase, things like that. Just it, and even if there's even sense of joking around and humor, it's starting to get at the not taking it too seriously, or being able to find ways to connect or be really, really human in those moments. So it's not an answer. I'm sorry about that, but it's just like both. I think it's important. I think that you can just choose to showcase what you're interested in and what you care about, and also choose to, create a new extension of your portfolio, or just thinking about how all that, your resume, your social media accounts, LinkedIn, et cetera, all work as a system to convey who you are and how you want to be perceived in those different spaces.
And I think also you can use social media. I think a lot of us have, a hobby or a side hustle.
Absolutely.
Like you mentioned, food and whatever else, you might be interested in, but that can also help you on a day-to-day in your professional, job, because you just never know what type of client might come through that door, and you're able to supplement that expertise into that, specific work or job. Um, so that,
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I feel like because we don't know who's going to come through that door. It's like I always feel like whatever podcast I'm listening to, it's like it was meant to be. Like I listened to that one day, but it's like it's just chance, and then it happened to be like we have a client, in that area, and it made sense.
yeah, you talked about experience, and you talk about creating an experience, and the very first thing that comes to mind was that design that your team put together called Spot, which I thought was amazing. And if you haven't checked it out, when we publish this, I'll make sure that there's a link. Um, but Spot essentially is a device that you guys created, that uses AI, and machine learning. And you guys created this really fun, um, handheld device for kids to go out and enjoy nature. And this AI device comes up with different things where the child can interact with nature, or birds or the trees, etc. There's different activities. But I was able to actually look at the whole process of how you guys started it, and the prototypes and everything. And I thought that was very fascinating. um, when I teach design, I always tell my students to focus on the experience, and the consumer object is the byproduct, right? And I think as design students, it's really easy to immediately rush to a solution without really focusing on the experience. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that part of the design process and why experience is very important.
Yeah, I mean, that what you just mentioned really echoes something that's a belief at New Deal Design, which is just thinking about the technology product as the means and not the end. So really thinking about how can this enable deeper connection, or more benefit to human experience. And so that's something that's just absolutely at the beginning of our process. And it's also an area that we explore a variety of different means of what thinking about Spot, for example, is just like, what are all these different outcomes that this could start to produce. And there was individuals on the team that were really, really deeply interested in thinking about childhood development. And so being very open in terms of where we could go with it, but making sure that it was really rooted in that foundational excitement about childhood development, and thinking about the different ways or the different outcomes in which what this could get you to through its use, and thinking about opportunity we have with Play Impossibles, just which is another toy that we had developed, which is just finding interesting ways to unite what was a digital physical ball and an app to get kids off the couch and moving. This is another way of getting kids out and exploring and finding new ways to also connect with their parents at the end of the day, which I thought was really wonderful. I'm super proud of the team on the project.
I mean, even the design you guys made for Postmates, that was like, um, that in itself was amazing because, that product could have gone 100 different ways and how it would visually look, right? And I think you guys focus on the user interaction. This design was going to, be outside. It had to be robust. It would interact with the public, and I mean that whole thing I think was very extremely intriguing, but also very complex. And I think you guys executed it, very well. So props to your team on that. I thought that was pretty cool. And again, a lot of these projects can be found on the New Deal website. So I'll make sure that I link that to when we post this on YouTube. My last question I have for you, Adam, is around
Yeah.
culture. And I think you make a really good point on culture. And I think culture is something that isn't talked about a lot in design. There's this chart floating around on social media. It was made by Michael DiTullo, and he said that good design is a result of when the user, the industry, and culture is all meshed together. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, that feels pretty spot on to me. I mean, I think it's just looking at, thinking about those external forces that I had mentioned and allowing that impact. And I guess, yeah, it's hard. I don't know exactly his foundation for that, but just thinking about, when we're at a place where technology can enable whatever it is, whatever the experience is that we're trying to get to, that's embracing culture and signals and looking towards the future of how we behave. And it has the human needs at the heart of, and the human needs at the heart of the process and the individual that they're serving at the end of the day. That seems like wonderful work, and that's the type of work that I like to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you talked a lot today about action and purpose, culture, experience. We have a lot of students that tune in to Lens. Um, a lot of this stuff is not covered in traditional academia. What's an advice? What's an advice that you would give a student who's watching on how they could integrate this in their student portfolio? Because I think a lot of this could really elevate their work, but also impress employers.
Yeah. So, yeah, and in thinking about that discussion we had just about social media and using it for professional versus personal, I think where you can injecting that, like that personal purpose behind what it is that you're doing, being able to show that how that's coming to life um, and displaying itself or occupying whatever that area is that you're talking about. Area, I mean, like whatever touch point that is, and even in the way in which you tell that story and how it lives in that portfolio, I think is really powerful. And just finding ways to inject that personality where you can, I think is going to be really, really beneficial and really helpful. And just thinking more of kind of these things that are almost like, it sounds kind of silly, but it's like pre-strategy or something that just feels like so fundamental as to like why we should be doing this in the first place, why this is a reaction, why this is from other forces of culture, of new technology, and why it feels meaningful, and having that as showing that as a starting point, or then why it's existing in this way, in the detail that you're showing or in the touch point that you're showing is coming from this maybe something that feels very fundamental or something that feels very intrinsic to you. I think that just shows that you can take a pretty nebulous idea, that's something that's also really felt, and then visualize it or create a visual metaphor for that we can feel and we can understand. And I think being able to tie those two together is really powerful.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate your insights. Thank you for presenting on the action of purpose. For those who are tuning in, thank you so much for being here today. Adam, have a fantastic holiday, and we will see everyone on our next episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.